Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to be taking a look at the settings I use for iRacing in terms of force feedback and VR. So to keep this as short as possible, let's get straight into it, starting off with force feedback. So you'll see first off here I've got the Thrustmaster control panel open. This is where we start with anything. Go to gain settings. So you can see, just like AMS2, I've maintained the same settings within the control panel. I try to keep these settings across all sims as best I can, just to avoid going back and forth and changing it every time I want to play something new or something different. Just like AMS2, you'll see I got 75% here at the overall strength, 100s at constant and periodic, zeros at spring and damper, and then I let the auto center be decided by the game. The other thing on the first page here, you'll see I've got it set to 900. I pretty much use 900 across all sims. Outside of really F1's the only one I can think of that, and I haven't played the most recent F1, so they may have fixed this, but previously you had to set this to 360 for F1, as it did not automatically change the rotation within the sim like others do. But otherwise I keep it at 900 across everything. So now we will flip over to the in-game settings and we'll take a look at those. Okay, now we're inside the sim itself. Going over to options, you can see our force feedback settings here. So just to quickly get started here, obviously enable force feedback. You're going to want that checked. Use linear mode. I have that unchecked. That's more or less for direct drive wheels. Some people use it and some people don't for cheaper belt-driven wheels. I'm currently not using it. Reduce force when parked. That's just a personal preference thing. So coming down to the sliders, we've got strength. We will get back to this in a second. Wheel force. I drive with a TS-PC. It's got a maximum force of 6 Newton meters. So I've got this set to 6. Now I do believe this setting is more for direct drive wheels. For me, I've gone back and forth, trying at 6, trying at all the way down. It really doesn't seem to make any difference, really, with my wheel. So I've got it at 6 now. I just leave it there. Damping, I go with 0. Minimum force. We will quickly jump out of the sim. I will show you a app for finding your minimum force and how to use that. So we will jump into that now. Alright, so now we're back at the desktop, as you can see. Right here I've got open is the iRacing wheel check app. I will put the link in the description to download this. So once you do have this, you want to come here to max count. Change this to 200. From there are 2 tests you can run with this app to find minimum force feedback. The easiest and simplest would be just go to min force. You click on that and you'll see it came up with a 1. You would want to run that a whole bunch of times. You could put under repeat 5, 10, and it'll just keep running it that many times. And you'll keep seeing the number change down here. So say you ran it 5 times, you watch for the 5 different results, add them all up, divide by 5 to get your average. That's what you would put under minimum force. Now that said, the other way, which I find more accurate, is the step log 2 linear force test. So with this one, you would click that. You kind of sit for a minute here. I don't have the webcam on, so you can't see this. But basically, you wait until your wheel starts moving. Once your wheel starts moving, it starts moving in very small increments at first. But once it's moving a little bit, mine's moving now, I will just go ahead and shut that down. Now, if you open up your documents, and you will see here, I have run a whole bunch. So these are logs from the minimum force. These are logs from the step log. So you will get these logs here. You'll open it up. It's easier if you have Excel or something like that. Spreadsheets, I don't currently have that on my computer, so I am going just with this, but this works. So you will see, you want to look down delta X, so the fourth number. You want to come down to wherever you see it, go above 0. So in this case, it's that one. If I open up another one, and this test you're going to want again to run multiple times so you can get an average. As you can see on this one, I got it up there. This one, I've got it here, and so on. So that's why you want to run it multiple times. And then you take all these and you get an average. So to be able to tell what this is saying, so you look where the first one is above 0. Now you go to the furthest column left, 600. Basically, you're going to delete these last 2 digits. And what you're left with is the percentage. So this one's telling me 6%. This next test was telling me 1%. This test was telling me 4%. Okay, so then you would, again, add those all up, divide it by however many tests, and you get your average. And that's how you get your minimum force. So if you did it 5 times and the average came out to 3%, you would set your minimum force to 3. Now, mine always comes out to around 3.4, 3.5%. As you can see, once I open the game back up, I do bump mine up a little further than that. And we'll jump back into the sim now and we'll take a look at that. Alright, so back here in the iRacing menu, you can see minimum force down here. That's what we use the wheel check app for. So for me, like I said, typically when I run the test, I'm around 3.4, 3.5% here. As you can see, I have bumped mine up to a 3.8. That might not be the perfect way to do things. I just find it a little bit of a better feeling for myself. So that's personal preference. Once you run that test, you've got the minimum force you should be using. And then from there, it's up to your preference. You can use that as a base and tweak it if you'd like, or you can stick with what the test tells you. Now, beyond that, the last thing we want to look at here is strength. So this is the overall strength that's running while you're playing. If it's too high, you're going to be clipping. If it's too low, you're going to be not feeling a whole lot. So to get this, we will go out and run a lap. iRacing will give you this number. It's got a built-in feature that will automatically detect the strength you need. So we will head out on track. And you just have to run a lap or so. Usually, depending on the track, you don't have to run even a full lap. But you get out here, change your black box down here over to the graphics adjustments. You'll see force feedback strength at the bottom, so you can adjust your force feedback on the fly while racing. So I'm going to change mine just to something way off. So we'll just get out here driving for about a lap. So right now I'm feeling very little forces at all with it turned down so low. You just drive normally. You do want to make sure it's a relatively clean lap so you're not getting any unneeded forces. So you can see now, after about 3/4 of a lap, this auto button came up. Click on that, and it gives you the forces that it believes your wheel can take. And now if you keep driving, all of a sudden, I'm going to feel a whole lot more through the wheel. And if you watch the force feedback meter up top here, you'll see usually with the forces it gives you, it'll be pretty good. Won't ever really clip, except for maybe, you know, the odd time going over a big curb, something like that. So we'll go back out to the menu here. So now you can see I have 13.1 strength. I forget what I had this car set to. So that's the other point I'm going to get to this. So that will give you, again, a baseline. And then from there, it's kind of personal preference. So when you use the auto function, it will give you one that will work and not clip. That doesn't necessarily mean you like it that strong. Me personally, I typically move it down anywhere from 1 to 3 notches from what it tells me, depending on the car. And again, all these I leave the same no matter what. Strength will change from car to car, and quite frankly, can change depending on the setup of your car. So it's nice having that auto feature, because even for the same car, you might change this from time to time just because you've made certain setup changes and you're not liking the strength anymore. But it's easy. You adjust it per car. But like I was saying, I personally like it down anywhere, depending on the car, from 1 to 3 notches below what the auto feature tells me. But typically I'll jump in a car, any new car, I'll use the auto, I'll get that baseline, and then I'll turn it down from there. Just makes it a much easier, quicker way about going things. And that's pretty much it for the force feedback. So once you figure that out for each car on to your liking, you're good to go. The last thing is use custom controls for this car down here. You'll want to check this. I set it up for my global controls. So if you click that, that's fine. I'll just delete the custom controls. But anything I change now will go under global, and any new car I open up will have these settings. So I've got all this set. Strength, whatever, we don't worry about, but at least everything else here is set. Next time I jump in any new car, this is what will come up. I'll click use custom controls and then dial in the strength from there, obviously along with button assignments as well. And that's it when it comes to force feedback. So it's fairly straightforward and simple. There's not a whole lot of options. And that's it. So we will now move on to my settings for VR and take a look at those. And I'll be right back. Alright, so starting with the VR, I will say I use a Quest 2. So some of these settings are kind of revolved specifically around the Quest 2, especially the settings within the Oculus Home app. Don't know if other headsets have similar settings. If so, you can try to adapt these to that. But these are mostly for Quest 2. So, we're going to start at the Oculus app. Going to go to devices, my Quest 2, come down to graphics preferences. As usual, I run 80 Hz. Again, I find that to be the best balance. between smooth gameplay, but leaving enough headway to get visuals as crisp and clear as I can. So I leave it at 80 hertz. And now, since the update to version 23 of Oculus app and link and everything, I've been playing around and trying something much different than I used to run in this game, and I think I've found my favorite setting so far. So you'll see here, and ultimately I'll say my ultimate goal is to make it as crisp and clear as possible when playing, just having as clear a picture, getting rid of as much as the shimmering as possible. By no means is all the shimmering gone, but I've tried to reduce it as much as possible. So you'll see once we get into the actual game settings, like I turned down a lot of the other stuff. I'm not so worried about having, you know, a whole lot of things trackside or other stuff going on during the race. I'm more or less concerned with getting a clean, clear picture. And I don't typically notice a lot of that stuff during races anyways, so it's fine by me. But starting here, again, 80 hertz. Render resolution. I've got this turned way higher than I typically run it. Partly to do with I find iRacing is one of the more optimized games for VR with some of the best performance. So I can get away with this. I don't think like ACC or even AMS2 I could get anywhere near this render resolution, even with everything set at its very lowest settings. So iRacing does have that going for it. But you can see I run it at 4464 by 2256 in the app, and that's it for my settings in the app here. So we will quickly jump back into the sim and take a look what I've got set there. Alright, so we're back in the sim now. Let's go under options here, under graphics. At a quick glance, you will see I've got a lot of stuff turned down. Like I said previously, that is so I can run that higher resolution or the higher render resolution in the Oculus app. As I sacrifice some of these details to get that higher resolution, that just gives a more clear picture and helps reduce the shimmering a little bit. So anyways, let's start at the top here. Render resolution, I've got set at 1080p. Now you can knock that down even lower if you'd like. This isn't the resolution in the headset. This is what will be rendering on your monitor as it mirrors it. I leave it at this because I record and I do streaming, and when I'm doing that stuff, I'm capturing it off the mirror on the monitor, and I want that at 1080p for those purposes. If I'm just racing, I will knock that down to just free up a little extra resources. UI zoom, that's a personal preference thing. It's got no impact on performance, but basically things like your black box and other UI elements will be bigger or smaller depending on what you set this to. Again, no impact on your performance, but it will either help you see things, or if you want them smaller and more out of the way, that's all personal preference. Multi GPU support, 1 GPU, number of screens for me, 1. SPS, have this checked. Well, definitely if you're running a 10 series or higher card, you want this checked. Beyond that, I leave full screen and border unchecked. Coming down, this slider is for presets, so don't touch this for now. Once you have these sets, don't touch that, it'll change it all. So now taking a look, basically here, sky, clouds, cars, pit objects, I put it all at low. Sky and clouds, because honestly I just never look at that stuff during the race, so I'm not worried about it. Free up some resources. Cars, as far as I understand it, low, medium, high detail on cars is strictly the reflections on cars. That can take up a decent bit of processing power, so I put it down on low. In VR with the lower resolutions and stuff, I don't find that a noticeable difference there at all, so I just put it at low. Pit objects, put at low. The higher you have this, the more you might see your frame rates dip down to ASW and whatnot as you go by the pits. They do not have an option to just show your own pits and turn everything else off, which would be nice, but I put it on low. Event I've got on high right now, because once I finished my settings and stuff, had a little bit of extra headway. I bumped that up. Usually I'll run that at low even. Grandstands, low detail again. I'm just not paying attention to that stuff. Crowds, I just turn off completely. All this stuff that's kind of off to the side of the track and everything, when you're racing, at least me personally, when I'm racing, I'm really not looking at that stuff, so it doesn't bug me. If you're really in the replays and stuff, you might want to have some of that turned up, but for me personally, I keep it all low. Now, objects is the one thing I do keep at high no matter what. Objects will be things, not necessarily the brake marker signs that you see, but it'll be other, like, kind of trackside stuff here and there. I leave that on high because when I've turned that down in the past, I notice some tracks, there's certain little landmarks or things that I use as a braking marker that were gone once I turned this down. So I leave that on high for that purpose. Just so I don't have to come up with all new braking markers and everything else when racing. Particles I've got on medium, full res, soft. Draw for cars I've turned down. So I've turned down to 20. You could turn this down even a little further if you'd like. Or up if you'd like, depending on your setup and where you have this. And I guess I should mention now that my system, I am running a Ryzen 3600 along with an RTX 2070 on the Quest 2. So those are my settings. So depending on what you have, you may have to lower resolution, or you can increase the resolution or increase some of these settings if you got a stronger card and whatnot. So take this as a base based on my setup of an RTX 2070 and go from there depending on your setup. Go dynamic LOD, world only, cars only, frame rate. I do limit it to just a couple frames per second higher than what my Oculus will run. Sometimes I just find that helps stabilize things from jumping around too much. Up here, filtering. Actually, I usually run that at 8x. Doesn't make a huge change to performance. AA I run at 4x. This helps with shimmering a little bit, though if you bump it all the way up to 8x, it's a huge performance hit and doesn't make that much of a difference. So, in my mind, not worth it. You can see checked render dynamic track data and tire data. Shadow maps on tracks and cars. Leave all these unchecked. Night shadows. To be honest, I almost never run in nights, so I'm not sure. I can't say this how it performs with these checked. I don't remember the last time I ran at night, so you may have to uncheck these come nighttime. Number of lights 3, PC F4 filter, cube maps all at 0, shader quality at high detail. Driver arms, that's your preference. 2 patch trees, I check off. Again, it makes the trees look worse, but again, I can't say I've ever noticed trees while racing, and it is a performance hit, so I turn that off. Cockpit mirrors, you could check this off. I believe if you just run the virtual mirror, it's a little less taxing on the system. But when I'm in VR, I'm in it for the immersion aspect of things. So I want the cockpit mirrors on. I want to be viewing those as you would sitting in a real car. Headlights, medium detail, headlights on track mirrors, check. Actually, I've been running with parallax turned off, and I really don't notice much of a difference, so I would keep that unchecked. I keep all of these unchecked except sharpening. Sharpening will make a huge difference to the clarity of what you're seeing. With that off, some things can be a little fuzzy, just overall a little less clear. Out of all the settings within iRacing, this is one of the biggest ones for giving you a much clearer picture. So I leave, no matter what, this is checked all the time. Like I said, I was running with parallax on, but I've turned it off now to update that, or to free up a little extra performance. I really don't notice really any difference within VR with that on or off. And so that's pretty much all the settings within the game. Along with the settings I had in the app, that's it. I pretty much can run rock solid 80 frames a second almost all the time, with the caveat of Long Beach, the most recent track. It is by far way more taxing on my system than any other track in this game. So I do typically have to knock down the render resolution in the Oculus app down like 1 notch to really get a solid frame rate, and even then it might dip slightly a few times during a race, and that's on an IMSA race with 40 cars as well. So with that track, you might have to change things a little bit, or I mean, if you're okay with it dipping down the ASW just here and there, you could keep these frame rate or these settings. But if you're running Long Beach, you might have to knock that down just a touch. Whereas every other track I've raced on, 80 frames per second, nonstop, never dips, even in IMSA with 40 cars on the track. It runs fine, so that's the performance I get with these. The other caveat is, I don't know if you're like me or not and stream every now and then, I do have to turn down the render resolution if I'm streaming, but that's more my setup, as I don't have a separate streaming PC. It's all running on the same PC, so once I do start streaming, the extra resources that the streaming takes, I do have to knock down the render resolution a bit if I'm streaming. But if I'm just racing for fun, I'm not streaming, I'm not recording, nothing like that, these settings will give me 80 FPS non-stop. So one other thing to show you, which isn't necessarily to do with anything for performance or anything, just an app I found that makes a bit of this easier, or if you switch between monitor and VR, makes it easier. And I just want to quickly show that. So I will be right back as we jump out to the desktop. Alright, so here we are. You can see I've got this app open called iRacing Config. So you can either Google that, or I will put the link down in the description. For me, recently I've been going back and forth. I've been practicing racing on a monitor again. So as I'm streaming more, I do want to start not using VR every time. Because VR is not the greatest when streaming, and you can't see the chat or anything. So I came across this app, which is nice, because when I'm running on my monitor, I can run everything maxed out. I get 150 frames a second. It's great. It looks great. All runs great. Obviously, I cannot run those same settings when I'm running in VR. And I don't want to have to change it every time, so I came across this, which is a nice little app. So when you go in and you set your settings, you'll see under here, you'll have iRacing current when you first start. So say you want to set your settings for monitor first. Go into iRacing, set everything up how you want. You would then come back out. You got iRacing current. So for me, I made a copy, renamed it to iRacing monitor. So I've got all my settings. So you can set them in game, or you can even make tweaks here. These are all the INI files. So you can see under graphics options, you can come in, start changing some of the options in here without going into game. Things like sharpening, it's off here. If I wanted it on, you just change it to a 1, save it, and it'll be on the next time. So you can change it within the app, or you can open the game itself, change it there. So once you have your settings, make a copy, change it to monitor. Now go back into iRacing, change your settings to whatever you want it to be for running in VR. When you come back out, those will now be the current. You make a copy, rename that to VR. So now I've got my settings set for monitor and VR. I've got them saved here. So say next time I want to go in, I'm racing on the monitor, select that, install. Now next time I go in, all my settings for monitor will be in place. If I want to change it up, race in VR, come to my iRacing VR, install. Next time I go in now, all my VR settings are in place. So it's just a nice little app I came across that just makes it much easier than going in and tweaking your settings every time. Just a matter of a push of a couple buttons and you're good to go. So I thought I'd throw that in here as part of the VR section. Because if you're like me where you bounce back and forth a little bit, I mostly run in VR, but now I'm racing more on monitor. It just makes this much, much easier. So again, I'll put the link for this app into the description, as well as the link for the WheelCheck app. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you all next time around.